After spending 3 years talking about other people's stories, I think that it's finally time that I introduce myself properly and let you hear mine. So this is the story of how I fell out of love with theater and what led to the day that I gave up on my dream. The way that my program worked was we would have 10 hours of theater classes worked into general university classes. But you'd always have at least one main acting class. My knowledge on the actual craft of acting was still very vague. I mean, my classmates were people who had been acting professionally for years. People who had enrolled in their first tap dancing class at 5 years old. And then there was small town me. In turn, that bled into a monologue I was doing from the play 4,000 Miles by Amy Herzog. So there was one line in this monologue that I ran through once, and the professor said, "You keep doing a down glide." The professor said that every time I did one, she was going to say "what?" and then I'd have to restart the line. There was just one problem. I didn't know what a down glide was. So I ran the line again, and again, and again. The professor finally just screamed out, "Stop being a and quitting on the line." The monologue was only 1 minute and 15 seconds. It took me 20 minutes to get through it. Major imposter syndrome kicked in, and I started to think that maybe I just didn't belong in the program. So fast forward 7 months to us sharing scenes from William Inge's Picnic in our main acting class. It was the same professor, and once again, she was not pulling punches. And after everything that happened the semester before, I wasn't exactly excited to bring our scene up for the beating. After we finished, we stood before the professor and the entire class in complete silence. And she just looked at her notebook. She looked up, stared at us, and said, "I don't have any notes for you." No one ever got away with no notes from this professor. So hypothetically, this should have been the thing that renewed my love for theater, and it should have made me ecstatic at the thought that maybe I did belong in the program. But now it seemed as if my passion had turned into an obligation. It was an obligation to my family to prove that me being an actor wasn't just a phase. It was an obligation to my town to follow through and become the working actor that they all said I was going to be. It was an obligation to my friends, my coworkers, my grandparents, but I never stopped to consider what I owed myself. Was I a good actor? Who knows? But one thing's for certain, my mental health was taking a pretty big hit. And so I did what I do when I'm stressed. I went to get a cup of coffee. I took a solitary trip to the school cafe, and I sat at a table looking at all the different journeys that were unraveling before me. There was one girl smiling with her viola, there was another guy smiling with his sketch pad, and then there was me and my sad-ass bagel. Why was I here? Who was I really behind the label that I had been carrying with me for my whole life? And it was here that I decided to give myself 1 year to try and figure that out. The start of my junior year wasn't looking any more promising. So I'm 5'7", I was 120 pounds at the time, and I've got the face of a 12-year-old. So not the best fit considering that all the shows they were doing revolved around 6-foot-tall men who needed to look like they were in their 40s. One time, we all got sat down in a circle in class, and the professor went around telling us what was wrong with our bodies. One person was too fat, one person was too short, and I was too skinny. So of course, I responded to this by gorging my face with chicken, rice, broccoli, protein shakes, all while listening to "I Am Phenomenal" by Eminem on loop in my apartment bedroom. And then I'd lose even more weight because my stomach would immediately reject it and leave me crying on the bathroom floor. So that on top of the play, on top of the monologues class, it really made me question if a life in the theater was all that it was cracked up to be. I was so sick of myself and other tremendous actors being consistently overlooked because we didn't fit the traditional leading type. And so, a group of us decided it was time to take things into our own hands. And we actually created our own theater company separate from the college program with the goal of casting the uncastables. Of course, per the requirements of my degree, I still had to begrudgingly audition for Matchmaker. And I got cast. And it was in a role that didn't show up until page 10, and one that, for the first time in a year and a half, was exactly my type. Barnaby Tucker. The next few months were intense, but in the back of my mind, I knew that the 1-year deadline was coming closer. It was like, okay, things are going well with the indie theater company, and I really like doing this, so do I stick it out? But I'm also still not feeling good, so do I move on? The tipping point for what I was gonna do came from a place that I didn't really expect. When we were a month out from opening Matchmaker, something happened with my uncle. So he had been on life support that entire semester after he succumbed to his alcoholism. But it had been almost 3 years since I had last seen him. I remember we were celebrating me getting into college, and he passed through, it was at my grandma's house, he passed through the kitchen on his way to work. And he opened the door, looked back, and he said, "Live up to that potential, kid. You're this family's only hope." And that was the last time I saw my uncle, alive. So I knew that I needed to be at that funeral because I really needed to be there for my grandma, who was absolutely devastated. So I asked the director for one Friday off. Remember, we're still a month away from Matchmaker opening. He pulled me aside and he told me that he was sorry for my loss and that I could absolutely go to the funeral, but it would really set the show back if I did. You know, looking back now, it's clear what the option is. I should have said, "I'm so sorry, but this is too important, I have to go home." But I missed it. I missed my own uncle's funeral, just so I could go to a rehearsal and move a table. And not a day goes by that I don't regret that. December 1st, 2016. I found myself back in the university cafe. The year had passed, and I was in a worse place by a landslide than I was the year before. So I stood up from the table, I went to my acting professor's office, and I told him I was leaving the program. Their response was, "Okay," and they slammed the door in my face. I missed out on so much of my college experience. I missed birthdays. I missed my own birthday for the good of the program. And I was met with a door slamming in my face. And that leads us to December 16th, 2016. I went on stage for my last performance of Matchmaker. I acted my heart out. And after it was done, I had a decision to make. I could either take a left and go out of the lobby and say goodbye to everyone, or I could take a right to go out the stage door and go it alone. I took the right, and I was no longer an actor. You know, the last line I said on stage was, "We all hope that in your lives you have just the right amount of sitting quietly at home and just the right amount of adventure." And that's exactly what I dedicated the remainder of my college career to. I sought to figure out who I was beyond that label of the actor. And what I found out is that I am a writer, I am a marketer, I am horrible at Dance Dance Revolution, I am addicted to Chili's, I am a wannabe gamer, I am a cat dad, I am a director, I am a producer, I am a friend, I am a son. And all of those things make me Brendan. So why am I telling you this? I want my story to be a message for anyone that is in this same situation. You are not alone in feeling this way. Your self-worth and your interests shouldn't be determined by the thoughts of a select few that we've decided to place on these pedestals. We believe that we are only as good as our most recent failure, our rejected scripts, our worst auditions, our horrible monologues. For some reason, we are taught to believe that we need to act a certain way, look a certain way, sacrifice certain things just to get the approval of someone else, and then we call that success? That is bullshit. You cannot grow if you're continuously being chopped down. Your quirks, beliefs, and interests are what make you unique. Case in point, it was only once I fully committed to exploring my interests that I actually started to feel like I was doing something worthwhile and that I had a purpose. And a large part of that is because of you. Without you and without this channel, I don't know if I would have regained such a deep love for theater. I guess what I'm really trying to say is I'm really happy you're here.